Hello everyone, Bag here. So I was already going to make a video like this while we were in the midst of the 3.0 beta, but then my version 1 coverage got copyright struck, meaning that all the reporting I did on Remembrance in that video is now gone. So now I have even more of a reason to catalog everything we know about Remembrance into one video. If you couldn't tell, we will be using leaked information, but I will not give any story spoilers during this video besides mentioning the 3.0 characters and their kits. And with that, let's get started. So, for some basics, what is Remembrance? Remembrance is a new path that is being added into 3.0, with two characters heralding its arrival, those being Agalea and Remembrance Trailblazer. This path is unique in that, unlike other paths that are confined to some sort of unit identity, such as healing, shielding, or different types of damage, Remembrance is confined to a very broad gimmick, that being their summons. Every Remembrance unit has a summon that is known as a Memosprite, and the scope of what this Memosprite can do is limitless. Already we have one that primarily supports, and one that primarily does damage. So it's safe to say that future Memosprites will also be equally varied. Unlike the current summons in the game, like Numby or Lightning Lord, these Memosprites do not deal follow-up attack damage, but rather they have their own new type of Memosprite damage, name pending. They also have separate traces to be leveled for their own damage in the trace menu, so they are a separate part of a character's kit from their ultimate, skill, talent, and so on. So what actually are Memosprites then? Memosprites act as an additional team member on your side of the field. So if you have one Remembrance character, your total team members are 5, or if you have 2 Remembrance characters, then you essentially have 6 party members, and so on and so forth. These Memosprites are actually on the field, meaning that they are targetable by enemies, they take up a position when it comes to blast attacks or blast healing when it comes to like Wuho skill or something like that, and they can take up certain slots for RNG, like being considered for Bailu's skill bounces. They generally have their stats inherited from their summoner, unless if it's stated otherwise. Like with our 2 examples, their talents both state that they have their own distinct speed, and that their HP is proportional to their summoner's HP. But other stats like attack, defense, crit, break effect, and so on are all passed down by the summoner. The other primary unique stat for each Memosprite is their aggro, or taunt value, like how Mem has an aggro of 200, which is even more than preservation units. Right now, Memosprites act without player input on their own turn, and target enemies automatically, either due to their ability just being AoE, or because there's something in their kit that tells them what enemies to target. The only exception to this is with Mem, who has a charge gauge that is basically equivalent to an ult bar, and when the bar is full, they immediately take action, and the player gets to choose which single ally gets Mem's buff. So in this specific instance, the player controls the Memosprite, but for everything else they act just like summons do right now. So as that implied, Memosprites do not have any ultimate gauge or anything like that unless if it's specifically in their kit like with Mem. And as for the rest of their kits, they have a skill that is just their attack that they do in their turn, and they have a collection of different effects that are all called talents, which is basically the same as a regular unit's talent, in which it just gives the Memosprite some extra effects or gimmicks to round out how they work. And these Memosprite skills don't actually generate or spend any skill points, by the way. Their wording is just kind of confusing on that front. There are also some more general rules that are so far true for the only 2 Memosprites we have to look at so far, but these rules may not hold true for every other Memosprite in the future, like how when a Memosprite gets hit, the energy gets transferred to the summoner, or how Memosprites using their skill actually also generates a bit of energy for the summoner. This means that, overall, Remembrance units will have a large amount of energy requirements, since, theoretically, they also generate energy for themselves incredibly quickly. So those are the basics. Remembrance units have Memosprites that act as an additional party member, with these Memosprites acting sort of just as a regular summon, except they're actually also on the field. Of course, the implications of them actually being on the field means that there are 1,000 fringe cases to go over in terms of how they interact with pre-existing mechanics. So let's go through some of the more important ones. As a quick note, a lot of this info comes from discoveries made on the Jstern mains Discord. So first of all, shout out to Jstern and his Discord for compiling all this information, and second of all, take this info with a grain of salt, as it could be inaccurate or changed before the actual release. First question, are Memosprites targetable by ally buffs? It seems like the answer is yes. You can action advance them with Bronya or Sparkle, they are affected by Robin's ultimate action advance, which is very good, and they can be shielded or healed like any other unit. Specifically, it seems like if an ability targets a quote-unquote ally character, it can't target Memosprites, but if it says allied target, then it can, which does make a good amount of sense. This also means, as indicated by the animation they showed in the 2.7 livestream, that party-wide buffs now include the Memosprite. So Aventurine's shielding or Fushuan's field now incorporate them as well. The main area that comes with confusion and caveats comes with the difference between buffing the Remembrance unit or their Memosprite. In short, during battle they are treated as different units, so buffing one doesn't buff the other. If you Ting Yun ult a Remembrance unit, their Memosprite doesn't get the damage buff, and vice versa. Party-wide buffs, like for example Bronya's ultimate, of course buffs both their Remembrance unit and their Memosprite, but there is no double dipping. So it's not like because the same quote-unquote party slot got the buff in two separate instances that the buff is counted twice. No. The Bronya ult just buffs each unit separately, it's as simple as that. This also, very notably, applies to certain relic sets, like Sacerdos only buffing the unit that is being targeted, not both the unit and their Memosprite. And the same goes for Banana Amusement? Yeah, I honestly don't know what is even going on with Banana Amusement, but for right now, the base crit damage is given to both the character and their Memosprite, since it's something that is added out of battle and is therefore passed down as a normal stat, but the second effect of there being extra crit damage if the unit has a summon is only given to the base unit, not the Memosprite. It's just dumb. Hopefully this has changed because otherwise this set is just really weird. There are a few niche exceptions to these rules. Like for one, energy gained by the Memosprite is given to the summoner. So if you Ting Yun ult a Memosprite, the damage buff is only given to the Memosprite, but the energy from the ult is passed down to the Remembrance unit. The other big exception is Sunday. Sunday just kind of bypasses a lot of these rules due to some very specific wording in his kit. If you look closely at his skill, it's not just that he lets the summon take action immediately alongside the actual unit, but he actually buffs both of their damage. This is the same with his ultimate. It says it turns the target and their summon into the beatified. So Sunday, with his skill and ultimate, is able to buff both the Remembrance character and their Memosprite. This also means that if Sunday uses Sacerdos, this buff also applies to both units, as technically he's targeting both of them at the same time with a single target ability. It's very jank, and you kind of have to look at it in a really odd way for it to make sense, but at the very least, it works how you would expect it to, I guess. In general, if an ability targets a unit and their summon, then the buff is given to both of them. Like for example, the new relic set coming to 3.0, which increases the wearer and Memosprite's damage specifically. This is the wording Banana Amusement is lacking, as it just says that the wearer is affected by the additional crit damage. So just a general rule of thumb, if an effect only affects, quote, the wearer, and it only gives its benefits once you're actually inside a battle, it won't help the Memosprite. For some other examples as to how this stuff works, there are two examples I want to show with each of the Remembrance units. I won't be going fully into their kits, but just looking at some specific parts of them. I'll put some videos in the description of some deeper dives into each unit from other creators if you're interested in learning more about them. For Remembrance MC, the main thing to note is with his ultimate, as Remembrance MC allows Mem to do an attack that hits all enemies. So even though it's the Trailblazer's ultimate, it's Mem doing the damage. So any buffs that are on Mem are the ones that are being calculated for this attack. Also, as another example, Mem's buff that gives true damage proportional to the damage dealt by an ally is another single target buff, meaning that you can't give the buff to both a unit and their Memosprite. You have to choose one or the other. For Aglaya, her enhanced basic is called a joint attack, as it uses both her and her Memosprite, Garment Maker, to do a big attack on her turn. So both her and Garment Maker's buffs are incorporated into this attack, since both of them are attacking separately. So figuring out ways to buff both of them would be your best bet in making the most out of them. Although with that being said, a lot of showcases are having success with using Mem on Aglaya, foregoing giving the buff to Garment Maker just because the buff and action advance is so good for her. So there are cases where you just have to bite the bullet and give the buff to only one of them, if that's just what the team comp calls for. So if things change throughout the beta, then I will update things in a pinned comment below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and make sure to subscribe when I cover version 5 of the 3.0 beta. Bye!